Welcome to WordCamp Santa Clarita 2021. My name is Mike Pilley, and I'm the Bakersfield, California WordPress meetup organizer, volunteer, and MC for this session. This is the 1 p.m. talk with Anne McCarthy in the Revolution track. Please feel free to add any questions to the YouTube chat feed, and we'll answer those at the end. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Anne McCarthy. Anne is a developer relations wrangler for Automatic, where she is focused on building positive relationships with developers in the WordPress community and currently spearheading the FSE outreach program. This session is titled Full Site Editing, What's Coming to 5.8 and the Story of the Outreach Program.
Howdy. To start, thanks so much for having me. I'm a big believer that time is all we can offer each other, so I really appreciate you spending time with me. I'll do my best to keep this as worthwhile and fun as possible. Please keep in mind that this is being recorded at the end of June, so I'm doing as much as I can to keep this as up to date as possible. Some things might have changed, but for now, let's dig in. This is a presentation on full site editing, the plan for 5.8, and the story of the outreach program. So to start, who am I? My name's Anne McCarthy. I live in the United States. I work for Automatic as a developer relations wrangler, and my general focus is on building great relationships with developers, but specifically right now, I'm spearheading the full site editing outreach program, which I'll talk about in a bit. For now, here's some quick fun facts about my journey into WordPress so you can know me a bit better. I first found WordPress in 2011 when I was in college. I worked on the university's multi-site, which was really a neat experience. In 2013, I went to my first WordCamp in Raleigh, North Carolina. In 2014, I joined Automatic as a happiness engineer. I focused first on Wordpress and later on Jetpack. And in 2020, in April, as if not too much was going on, just a pandemic, I switched into the developer relations wrangler position where I currently work. So let's get meta and talk about what this talk will look like. So you know what to expect. I always like to know what's to come, so let's do it. So to start, I'll zoom all the way out before going slowly in, both about the full site editing in general and about the outreach program. This will take the form of this talk outline. So we'll give a big picture overview of full site editing, some full site editing milestones, WordPress 5.8 plans, a demo of various 5.8 features, the full site editing outreach program, and some key feedback that we've gotten, some open thoughts and questions on future outreach program models, and then I'll address some key topics and questions. But hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a really good sense of why full site editing is being done, what's coming in WordPress 5.8, why the outreach program exists, and some answers to some common questions and concerns that I hear. So what is full site editing at a high level? And as a note here, you might hear me say FSE, and if I say FSE, I'm also referring to full site editing. I'm just using shorthand. So full site editing is a collection of features, and it's really important to talk about the collection of features part, and I'll touch on this in a moment. But it basically brings the familiar experience and extendability of blocks to all parts of your site rather than just the posts and pages. And it's important to underscore the collection of features part. So what does that actually mean? I find that many people refer to full site editing as one big thing. So it's one big project, when actually it's a very binary on-off way to think of full site editing. And in truth, while it might be easier to talk about full site editing as this big thing, it's actually a collection of many different pieces. And so I encourage you to adopt that thinking of full site editing as a collection of features that allows for adaptability in what we can release, and also allows an adaptability for what you want to explore. So what does full site editing actually allow me to do? So I'm sure you're thinking this sounds great and interesting at a high level, but what can I actually do with these features? And obviously it depends on who you are and it depends on which part of the features you're digging into. But to help give a sense of what these efforts are unlocking, here are a few examples with different use cases in mind. Please keep in mind, though, that some of this will arrive in 5.9 rather than 5.8. So some of what I'm talking about won't actually be coming out in 5.8, but something to get you excited and to give you a taste. The demo should also do that as well. So if you're a user, you can do everything from customizing your 404 page to editing your header directly to creating a custom template for a specific category of posts. The image here is actually from a call for testing that I did through the full site editing outreach program from a fellow designer, not fellow designer, but one of my coworkers who's a designer named Channing. She built this beautiful 404 page, and while we all don't have the design chops that Channing does, it is really neat to see what's possible with full site editing right now. For theme authors, you'll be able to tap into design tools that will allow you to focus less on the basics and more on actually designing experiences. You can opt in and out of whatever you want as you're ready to explore as well. If you're an agency, you'll be able to have greater control over what you're able to offer clients, including things like setting custom brand colors or typography, or locking down certain parts of the site once you have it exactly as the customer wants. So how is this work being done? So rather than trying to go through everything in one go, this project has actually been broken down into 7 different milestones. And some of these milestones are completely separate, their own thing. Some are very interrelated, some mix and match in different ways. But we're going to go through each of them so you can get a sense of how this is being done. I'm going to try to stay at a high level and before going into a very brief demo midway through the presentation, but hopefully this will give you a sense of what this looks like. So milestone 1, this is actually such a big milestone that it was broken into 2 parts. And essentially, this is all about laying the foundation. Everything from multi-entity saving, which is actually being displayed here in the GIF that you see, where you can actually update multiple things at once, including like a template part, like you update your header, you update a post, and you update your footer. It'll show all the changes happening and allow you to check and uncheck different boxes to save. Basically, just think about this as building the foundation of the experience, the technical foundation, unlocking things like being able to edit a template directly, to working on specific blocks for full siting, like the site title. So we have a site title block and it updates everywhere you have it listed. Milestone 2, browsing. Again, there's another little visual so you can see what this actually looks like. This is basically giving you a map and a GPS to know your location, how to get where you need to go for your site. So because there are these new parts of editing your site that are unlocked with full siting, like template editing, and template parts like a header or footer, there needs to be a way to navigate between them. So this milestone is dedicated to that. How can we make it as easy as possible for you to get where you need to go? Milestone 3, styling. So this actually covers a couple different layers, and I'm going to break it down in this slide and then the next one to help give you a sense visually of what this looks like. But this includes everything from the technical requirements to make various levels work, and the UI for users. So you can actually see a depiction of the future design for the UI that users will interact with in the image right here. So there's generally 3 layers, including styling for local blocks, theme defaults, and then global modifications, or what we often call global styles. You can think of global styles as basically having the option to edit all aspects of your site. So if you want to set a typography that goes across your entire site, if you want to have certain colors for all H1 headers, you can set that up with global styles. Currently, much of the work has been focused on the technical underpinnings, especially around aspects like theme JSON, which is a very key component for block themes and a really big tool for block theme authors. But for 5.8, the focus is generally going to be on merging the non-user interface parts of global styles. So don't expect to interact with this system unless you're a theme author. If you are a theme author, get really excited. And here's a little visual just so you can get a sense of it. So these are the different layers that have to interact in the styling system and the hierarchy that needs to be thought of when working on this milestone. Milestone 4, theme blocks. So because full siting opens up so many more aspects of the site to edit, new blocks had to be created basically. So if you're creating a new template for a specific category and you're putting in post content, and you want to add the post author block, which you can see here, you can quickly add it in, customize it to your liking, add in post comment, add in post date, or remove the post date. You can edit each parts of these things. What's pretty exciting about this is that there's actually 20+ blocks that fall into this category. And if all goes as planned, some of those will be released for 5.8 and available potentially for all sites. So even if you're not using a block theme, you could have access to these theme blocks, which is pretty powerful and pretty cool. Milestone 5, the query loop block. This is a specific milestone dedicated to one block, which tells you just how powerful it is. It's ultimately meant to be a theme author tool that'll allow for an easy way to query posts or pages and display them in various arrangements, which you can see demonstrated in this GIF. In general, end users won't interact with it too much. It is being released in 5.8, but will be view only, so you won't be able to edit things like the post title that's shown, or the post content block while it's in there. But it is tend to be a more advanced tool for more advanced users who are looking to dig in Most folks will likely interact with what will be called a block variation, like a post list block. You can think of it as a really advanced post list block, basically. But it's very powerful at this point, and only will get more so as more settings are added in. And as you can see here, there's actually different setups for placeholder content. And actually for 5.8, there's going to be some really cool patterns integrated. So you can pick between different grids and different layouts that you want to create really pretty content. Navigation block. Again, this is just a single block, but don't be fooled. It's definitely a mighty one. So this milestone is dedicated to all things navigation block, both in terms of structure and design. And you can see in this little GIF I have going on, I'm just kind of making little design changes and moving things around so you can get a sense of what it's like to interact with this block. And it actually includes, this milestone actually includes everything from how do you build a really simple menu with a few items to thinking about how to create a really large mega menu and add in new blocks like the search block that you can see here, or even adding submenus, different designs, different layouts, and more. So the last piece of the milestones is the gradual adoption. And I hope this GIF makes you laugh, but also seriously, this is like the intent is like, we slowly want people to be able to adapt in the way that they can. And once more of these pieces are completed, there's basically a ton of room to start exploring how adoption might look like for those who can't or don't want to restructure a full theme. So this might be an intermix of block-based themes and regular PHP templates, or it might be covered by projects like the block-based widget editor and the navigation screen. Both of those projects I'll cover later, but for now, just keep in mind that this is intentionally a milestone. We want to allow for gradual adoption and want people to have lots of pathways in to taking advantage of full site editing. So now you have a sense of the milestones. Let's actually talk about what's coming in WordPress 5.8. So to start, these are the overall plans, and I'll go through each of them now. So all the improvements in Gutenberg 10.0 to 10.7 will be included in this release, which is a lot of things. We'll introduce some new blocks, including the query loop block and the site logo and more. There's a lot of what we're calling theme blocks that are being included. So site logo, site icon, post title, post list, all those sorts of things. There'll be a new theme JSON mechanism, which if you're a theme developer, this is definitely something you want to check out. There'll be a template editor for pages and creating blank templates. I'll talk more about adoption for this in a second. There will be the block widget editor, and as well as you'll be able to edit blocks in the customizer in widget areas, which is really cool. So it's basically bringing blocks to the widget experience. Then there'll be some design tools, including Duotone, layout controls, padding, and more. So in terms of adoption, so how is this actually being rolled out? So block themes will not actually work with 5.8. However, the theme JSON mechanism will be there to explore. So if you want to build a block theme, now is a great time to dive in and to do so. If you do use a block theme, you just have to install the Gutenberg plugin and it will work just fine with 5.8, but will not work out of the box. The template editor, which will basically be a mode that I'll demo in a bit, that goes over how to actually, you can explore building new templates for your sites, whether that's like a landing page or a portfolio page or a special recipe page for all the posts in the categories for recipes. You can create custom templates for each of these things. This will actually be opt-in for classic themes. So themes will have to actually add in supports for this, and it will be opt-out for block themes. And then the block widgets editor will be opt-out via 3 pathways, including a classic widgets editor plugin that you can use. And then there's some theme supports and some filters for admins. And finally, design tools will be opt-in using block supports mechanisms. So I mentioned all this just so you have an understanding of this isn't just going to take over your site and everything's going to be done. There are actually pathways to opt in and out as you see fit. I also will say this is a great time to explore because key takeaways, only what's ready will be shipped. This is not an on-off switch. And finally, the focus is on giving tools to extenders first. So if you're an extender, now is the time to dig in and explore what might be huge benefit for your users going forward. Okay, it's demo time. So to help you get a sense of everything that I'm talking about, I really like to give a good visual. So that's what I'm going to do here. For context, I'm using the 2021 theme. No modifications done. I'm also using the WordPress beta tester plugin, which is a great plugin you can use to test the latest and greatest while it's under construction. I am doing this on a demo site, so I highly recommend you do the same. But this is using WordPress 5.8 RC1. And this first part of the demo is going to go through some new features, like some new blocks, like the query loop, Duotone, the list view, and more. And then in a moment, I'll actually show a separate demo of the block widgets editor, since that's such a big feature that's coming. For now though, let's create a portfolio page. So I'll call this portfolio. From there, I'll add the query loop block, which is one of the blocks that I mentioned is coming to 5.8. You'll see this setup, which is pretty neat. So the whole configuration screen. If you go here, there's some neat patterns you can choose from. So in this case, I actually really like this pattern in particular. So I'm going to select it like this. From there, I'm going to show off list view, which is a super neat tool that you can use to navigate complex content. And it helps you just see everything on the page. So in this case, you can see there's 2 columns, column 1, column 2, and inside each is a query loop block. And it's displaying my content. It's pretty cool. If I go all the way up and select the group block, I can actually make this. It's like right now this is pretty narrow. Let's say I want it a bit wider. Make it full width, even it out a bit. I can do things to actually edit the blocks within this. So within this query loop block, there's the post featured image. There's the post title block, which is another new block coming. Then there's the post date block. And you can actually add basically other new blocks into this as well, which is pretty cool. So if I had post content in these, I could actually add post content, which is pretty nifty. In this case, all of these are just basically featured image with pretty simple titles, but you can see how this can get pretty cool and you can customize it to your liking. You can also do things like for this one, I could change the heading level. So if I wanted this to be H3 instead, you actually see it updates all the way down. I actually really like it at H2, so I'll keep it at that. I can center it. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna center this too, just to match it, and it'll match all the way down. Pretty neat. You can even do more complex stuff. So opening back up list view, you could actually set colors. So let's say you want a different background for this entire section. You could hit custom colors, drag all through here until you find something that you like. In this case, try and find something that matches this well. We'll make it a little bit more red. Yeah, something like that. That looks pretty cool. We'll keep it there. And you can set this as you'd like across the board for all of these things. Another cool thing that I actually really like is you can set this to link to the post. So now when people click on your featured image, they'll automatically be taken to the post, which is also pretty neat. From there, if you want to do more customizations, so you want to align this center to, just have everything centered, you do that as well. So now we're looking like we're in business here. To get even more complex though, let's say you wanted to edit the actual query that you're using. So maybe you want to have more items shown. Maybe we'll increase that to 3. Boom. Now there's another one. And the third one matches the other 2. Let's say I want to do the same thing here. I can select it all the way up, increase it as well. And it'll also show a third one here. So now I have even more items on the page. So there's also some neat settings where you can actually change what's inherited here and exclude different things, specify specific categories. So in this case, I might just say I only want parks to show. So now only parks are showing in this column. But then let's say I want, in this one, I only want buildings to show. Boom. So in this column now I have the query loop showing me just parks. And this one I have it showing me buildings. So let me make sure that actually the number of posts I want showing, because you'll notice that one's missing here. So it likely means I need to change the offset. There we go. So now you can see there's a distinct part, like buildings over here with some funny titles. And then you have parks on this side. So at this point, I'm kind of liking how the query block is looking. How can I spiffy up this page even more? So let's try adding a cool cover. So if I type in cover, you can see this comes up. I can also use, with patterns, I can check all of these out. I can even switch through. So in this case, I kind of want to get something that looks like a cool header. It has a really pretty image. I really like this, so I'm going to go with that. Close out of it. Boom, look at that. So I don't love the fixed view right here. So I can actually quickly say, you know what, I want it to be like this. Boom, cool, I like that. So in this case, I can actually replace this image. So I can make it my own. So now that I've added in a pattern that I really like, I can make it my own. I can say Santa Clarita demo. Thanks for joining. And I can change this to say demo. There's no link in this right now, but in theory I could add one. So I can also show you this cool new feature called Duotone. So it adds a neat filter to the image itself. And you can get real wild with this. So you can see, you can kind of get pretty intense with the different filters, which is pretty cool. You can also select your own. So if I wanted to do something like that, and then maybe highlights, do something with pink, purple, I could do that. Close out and see what that looks like. I actually kind of like that. Looks pretty cool. From there, you're all set. You can even add in more. So if you wanted to add in something here, you could, and kind of just make the entire pattern that you just added your own. So in this case, this kind of shows off some of the new blocks that you've seen, the list view, some of the more integrated patterns, and as well as the query loop block. So at this point, let's actually turn to the block widgets. There is another feature that I'm not going to mention here that is template editing mode that actually allows you to go into an editing mode where you're editing the template you're working on directly. I have a link to a video in the resources that you can dig into if you'd like to learn more. But for now, that's kind of a niche feature that's coming to 5.8, and I'd rather have you dive into the widgets. So let's go ahead and do that now. So as you can see, once you load the appearance widget section, you'll go through a nice little welcome guide that helps you get to know the block library, the block editor, and more. From there, you can get started. At this point, I'm going to quickly demo how the widget area will actually adapt based on what theme color palette you're using. So this is showing different changes that I'm making to my theme and how it displays in the widgets area. You can also disable this. So say you don't actually want to see your theme styles, you can turn it off and on. Pretty neat. From there, you can actually see different widget areas. So this is the footer and the sidebar, and you can collapse them as you'd like. You can also drag between them. So let's say I want to move this image. I can do so very easily with drag and drop. Now let's say I want to remove a block. Again, you can use the same tools you're used to, just hit the back button and you're good to go. On top of this, this will actually show you how it unlocks a whole library of blocks that you can now use in widget areas. So let's say I want to add a legacy widget. There's a nice little drop down that I can just select what I want to add, and I'm all set. Now on the customizer, you can again see the same footer and sidebar. Once you enter it, it'll again give you a nice little welcome guide just to get you introduced to this new block experience. Once in there, you can scroll down and have the same live preview that you're used to with the customizer. Now, if I want to make changes, this will show you kind of an advanced view of how you can make customizations. So let's say I want to make this a little bit smaller. Boom, easy to do. I can see it live on my site. I'm good to go to publish. At this point, let's chat about the Full Citing Outreach Program, which, as a reminder, is the program that I currently run. So I'll go over a few big picture questions, just like we did earlier with all full site editing. So to start, what is it? As the name suggests, it's a program that is focused on full site editing. Currently, it's just in the form of a Slack channel with curated calls for testing, feedback summary posts, and various educational opportunities like live streams of people building block themes or hallway hangouts where people can come and talk about full site editing and more. What's the goal? The goal is simple: to help improve full site editing experience by gathering feedback from WordPress site builders. And I'll note that while the group originally started solely as a mechanism to get feedback to people building full site editing, there's also a really neat educational component that's in place where people can join to start building their own awareness and understanding of what's to come. Why was it started? It was started originally in May 2020 with about 100 people who signed up to opt into this experimental program and has now grown to over 300 people, which is pretty neat. And it was intended to help create better engagement with users to get feedback to developers more seamlessly. This was a lesson that was learned after WordPress 5.0 was released when Gutenberg was first introduced. It became pretty clear from that experience that there needed to be user feedback given to people earlier in the process. So especially for a change as big as full site editing, it was decided to try this experimental program to bring in more feedback and help bring people along more, and to do so using a new pathway with this outreach program. So now let's dig into the top pieces of feedback. So we've done about 8 or 9 calls for testing at this point that I'm recording this. And these are the top pieces of feedback that have cut across each call for testing. It doesn't cover everything though, because it doesn't cover each minutia that comes up in each summary post for each call for testing. And on top of that, there's actually certain parts of full site editing that we haven't even been able to test. So a good example is the global styles user interface that I mentioned earlier. Because that's not even built or released, that hasn't been tested in depth. And so there's not gonna be feedback on those items. So it's something to just keep in mind as your own foundational knowledge when you're looking through this feedback. It doesn't cover everything, but with that said, it does cover the main pain points that have come up in these calls for testing from the community. Previewing content. Publish a post, you want to go preview it, or you're editing a post, you want to go preview the content. The same thing is true with full site editing. This is a big thing that kept coming up. And my question is this a necessary workflow? Or is it a symptom of other problems? Because in general, it should be, the site editor should be as WYSIWYG as what you see as what you get as possible. So if you're making a change, it should look exactly the same as the front end of your site. And because it doesn't right now, it's causing this tension. There actually is a preview site option under discussion, as well as a browse mode option, which basically would turn off, if you're actually editing your site, it would turn off everything that wouldn't actually show up on the front end. So if you only have one page of post, but you have pagination set up, so if you had multiple pages, that would actually go away. So as you can imagine, this is currently for discussion, but there actually are a couple different pathways to try and address this problem, but it's a very important one to address. Saving process. I like to say it's technically reliable, but not yet delightful. So basically, it's left a lot to be desired right now, and it's resulted in a fair bit of confusion. There's a lot of feature requests and enhancements and bugs that have come up related to saving. And this is likely because the multi-entity saving aspect that I demoed earlier is very new for WordPress users. It's not something we're used to having as part of our workflow. So it's something that inherently needs some work on. So whether it was, people requesting more granular saving options to show specifically what was being changed, to issues with saving for screen readers, to confusion around even just what the general parts mean, like what you're actually selecting or unselecting, this was definitely a big, big area of feedback. Distinction between editing areas. So basically, because you can edit all parts of your site, it's hard to know, like, am I editing the header for all of my site, or am I editing just a specific piece of content on a post? And this kind of distinction, jumping between different levels of like, oh, you're changing this will change everything, to you're just changing this one thing in this one spot, is pretty tricky. And right now there's not a lot of friction, and there's not a lot of clarity in the actual experience to show when you're actually jumping between those different levels. So this was a big piece that's come up, and it's something that is an active area of iteration and exploration to kind of get the right amount of friction in place. So rethinking with an alignment. Previously, alignment and full site editing worked to optimize how traditional themes worked, where they basically, traditional themes provide their own alignment styles. And this worked okay for the project up until this point. But recently, work has been shipped to reimagine how this dynamic should work to allow for actually more control over alignments and width when using the site editor. And this should actually help make sure that whether you want something that's full width or you want to change the actual width of your content that's showing up, that it'll actually be what you see is what you get. And right now, this is another piece of feedback at a high level that's impacted that what you see is what you get experience. General usability improvements. I admit this is totally a catch-all, and it covers a ton of stuff, but it's actually a very important one to think of because it'll actually move the site editing experience from being just functional to actually delightful, which is really exciting. And there's a ton of issues that are included in this, including some enhancement requests, bug reports, all that good stuff. One of my favorites to talk about is creating a background image on a template part. So imagine you have a header, you're working on it, you're super excited, and you're almost done, and then you're like, oh, do you know what would be really cool is if I had like mountains in the background? maybe I'll add like a cover block in the background and add an image and set the opacity pretty low, but have mountains going in the background of this site. That's really hard to do. You basically would have to delete everything and add the block in and then add everything back. So those are the kinds of experiences that we're trying to improve right now. Improving placeholders. So placeholders, especially for some of the newer blocks, are a powerful way to both guide people and a current point of confusion. So you probably saw this with the navigation block earlier where it had those little gray boxes. It's like, how do we explain to people, hey, this is something you have to set up and engage with, but here's generally what it will look like and what it will do. And the feedback for this mainly came into play with the query block, social icon block, featured image block, and the navigation block. Each currently actually also get users started in different ways. So not only are there different placeholders for different experiences, the actual experience of interacting with the placeholders are all pretty inconsistent right now. So I think in the long run, it seems that users will benefit a bunch from a standardized, consistent way to interact with placeholder content so that it becomes a really familiar interaction when you're working with a more powerful block. And this especially is true for the query block and navigation block. Let's take a step back at this point and actually talk about the idea of the program itself and what it might actually mean for future ones. I'm very keen to bring others into mulling this stuff over because I've thought about it a lot over the last year. And I'd love to think about what we can do to actually create more valuable programs in the future if this is a model that we see as sustainable and helpful and high impact. So this next section will take the form of top level, high level questions with some of my thoughts shared after. And I welcome you to join this conversation and share your own. So is this a model that we should continue in the community? Based on my experience of the last year plus, I definitely think we should. I think there are some caveats onto what we can learn from this last year that we can bring into future programs. In general, though, I found it to be a model that flips the prior approach on its head in a pretty powerful and productive way, allowing more folks to participate and make their impact on WordPress. When I say flipping the model, I basically mean rather than people saying, hey, come to us, we'll help you figure it out, we're actually going out to people and really pushing calls out to folks in a way that I think is pretty cool. So assuming, yes, this is a model we want to continue, what would actually help set future models up for success? So I think, first and foremost, an effort needs to be made to better define what qualifies as needing one. I think this is really important to have as a foundational item because you want to set expectations in the wider community around when these happen. So basically, you don't want someone to say, hey, this is really important. Why isn't there an outreach program for this? Because there's not going to be able to be an outreach program for everything. Personally speaking, I also think they should be limited to 1 or 2 at a time to prevent saturation. Mind you, running this program was done in a very weird environment with a pandemic going on. So I'm not sure how much that'll be true if the community comes back and is very blossoming and amazing. Like maybe that totally change things when you have lots. But right now, in my mind, I think 1 or 2 is more than enough. I think they need to be launched with more intentionality around the timing of when the feature is going to be released. So originally, this program was actually launched in May 2020, but we didn't actually start calls for testing until December 2020. And that led to a little bit of like improvisation on my part to make sure people joining actually still were getting something out of it and staying up to date in the project and engaged in what was happening. But personally speaking, I would have loved a shorter window. This is easier said than done because you can't always predict when things are going to be released though. Tied to this, I actually think they should be very much aligned with current teams to ensure they remain high impact. I worked very closely with the core editor and the core folks to make sure that what we were working on was actually in line with what they were planning on doing going forward. But this is something that has to be done very intentionally, and I think will set future programs up for success. I think they need at least 1 full-time volunteer who is likely sponsored, ideally from different 5 for the Future organizations. I don't like whenever I see just clusters of folks, so I think it would be great to have a diversity of folks from different 5 for the Future organizations as a part of this. But I do think whoever helps run these in the future, it needs to be almost a full-time focus or split across a group of people. But ideally, there's 1 person who is fully focused on ensuring the success. One of the things that really surprised me that I love to mention here is that in my mind, this program was solely focused on feedback. And because there was that delay, because the community was so cool, it actually changed so that the focus was from the start. I think the focus should be for future programs on both feedback loops, education awareness, and just building community. Because I actually think that proved to be a major advantage and one of the things that I love the most about the current outreach program. And then finally, I want to mention that they should work closely with the polyglot teams to ensure translations. If you've ever been somewhere where they don't speak your mother tongue or a language that you know how brutal that is to adjust. And this is a big part of bringing the whole community with us is translations and really lowering the bar so that people can join in no matter what language they speak. And so this is something I'm deeply indebted to the polyglots folks for ensuring and translating, which has been really cool, especially shout out to the folks in the Japanese and Italian and Spanish groups. So what are the risks? I believe each of these can be mitigated, but they're still worth mentioning. So again, as I mentioned up top, lack of clarity on when a program is formed, which could result in a lot of frustration when a perceived big feature doesn't have the same level of outreach. Programs being led by the same 5 to future organizations, it could create feelings of mistrust or exclusion. Like, how do I get involved in this? How can I get something started? Programs being separated out from active teams, resulting in more activity than achievement. And also it would impact the feedback loop. So it probably would not end up being bidirectional and would probably end up being a bit scattered. Multiple programs being run at once, causing muddied messaging and lack of engagement. For example, I think having one about full site editing makes perfect sense. I don't think having one about like the widgets editor makes a ton of sense. And then programs that only focus on feedback, causing people to miss out on the power of the community and helping people prepare for an upcoming part of WordPress. It's more than just feedback. It's also education and awareness and actually connect with other people who are trying to solve the same problems. So what role should these programs play? Simply put, I believe these programs should play a part in outreach, onboarding, and an educational role in the community. And I'm really excited to see what might come up in the future. So if you want to read more, you can go to nomad.blog/FSE. And on that page, there's actually a link to a post where I talk in depth about what I just shared here about future outreach programs models. Please comment on that post. Please engage with me. My contact information will be at the end. So now we've covered milestones, the outreach program, and more. I'm going to quickly run through some key topics that have repeatedly come up as I've chatted with folks about full site editing. Will full site editing take over my site? Hopefully you all can say no. This is something that has to be opted into mainly through using a block theme that supports these features. In time, I expect more pathways to be built, but for now, no, it will not take over your site. What about the block-based navigation and widget editors? So in case you missed it, there are actually 2 additional projects that are underway to bring the power of blocks to both widgets and navigation. These are meant to help classic themes in particular adapt to a more block framework and to act as a stepping stone of sorts for full site editing. These are separate projects from full site editing though, but they ultimately help the cause of getting more people adjusted to using blocks in more places. Currently, the navigation editor is not planned for 5.8, while the widget editor is hoping for inclusion in 5.8, depending on testing and feedback. So what about site builders? This is a topic I hear a lot about, so I'm going to try to be as concise as possible. So full site editing is, first of all, being built so that people are not locked into one site builder over another. It's also being built for site builders so they can build on top of what's being created. But ultimately, I've heard people say that they expect full site editing to duplicate the functionalities of their favorite site builder, but that's not the case. Full site editing is meant to build the foundation, and then there'll always be room for more opinionated takes to open up access more for site editing, shut down access, and just generally speaking, have a more nuanced experience geared towards specific use cases. At the same time, though, at the core, both site builders and full site editing do share a commonality in wanting to empower users and give tools, better tools to customize a site. How is this going to impact themes? In the long run, it should make theme development much easier and simpler, with design tools ready to tap into, allowing theme authors to focus less on coding and getting the basics in place and more on design expression and aesthetics and actual experiences. I will say I've heard people think that themes are going away, and I would actually argue that that's not at all the case. Because full site editing requires a block-based theme, this makes themes extremely important to get right, and actually a really big way for pathways to be built, which leads me to my next question. What pathways are going to be created? There are going to be loads of pathways, mainly because this is the entire point of the final milestone of full site editing, the gradual adoption milestone. This will include everything from a classic theme that takes advantage of global styles or template editing or the block-based widget screen to a theme that works with both the customizer and full site editing. This might mean allowing full citing specific blocks to be enabled in classic themes. It might mean the ability to edit block templates within a classic theme. There are a ton of options here though, and ultimately it makes me really excited to see what people both do with the tools that are given in 5.8 and what gaps we end up finding in preparation for 5.9. So what's the best way to prepare? This depends on who you are, and depending on who you are at a high level, this is what I recommend. Join the Full Citing Outreach Program and make Slack. I am obviously very biased since I run that program, but I do think it gives you a great look into what's happening and helps you build your own awareness. If you're a themer or a theme author, check out the Theme Experiments repo and see what other people are doing to build block-based themes. Related to that, you can join the bi-monthly block theme meeting where people gather to discuss the latest and greatest with block theming. And then there's also the weekly core editor meetings in Make Slack, which is great if you're a developer, an end user, a themer, more. Finally, keep an eye out for upcoming content on Learn WordPress. By the time you're watching this, there may already be content in place, but it's definitely an area that I expect to see evolve as WordPress 5.8 is released and as more content is ready to be created to help expand people's awareness and understanding of full citing. Finally, I want to offer 2 ways to stay connected. I am at @AnnZazu on WordPress.org Slack, and also my website is nomad.blog, and I have a contact form there if you would like to stay in touch.
Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you so much for that session. That was very informative and I think put together really well. Everyone, we're actually not going to have the Q&A at this point, but please put your questions. We're going to try and move those over to the Slack channel so that we can continue the conversation. And don't forget to attend the next talk, which is how theme developers should approach full site editing with Joe Casabona at 2 p.m. Thank you so much.